Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video at EICMA in Milan, the biggest and best motorcycle show in the world, and we're here at Ducati for a big update with the new Panigale V2 and Streetfighter V2. This is a new platform, a new engine, so can it live up to the previous generation Panigale V2, which was, it has to be said, a heck of a bike? Well, let's have a good look at it, and here we go with everything that you need to know. Now look, the big update here is the engine. This is their new V2 that was announced about a week or so back. And basically it's set out to replace two of their engines. So the Stretta, which is a bit of an all-rounder, and it's in their adventure bikes like the Desert X and the Multistrada, and also the Monster Naked and the Super Sport sports bike, and even the Hyper Motard. So this has to be a very flexible engine that can replace all those different genres of bike. At the same time though, it replaces the Super Quattro, which was used in the previous Panigale V2 and the Streetfighter V2. And so you want a bit of performance as well, with that being quite top-endy and peaky and making 155 horsepower. Now look, naturally there's a bit of a compromise in having to build something that replaces, you know, such a broad spectrum of performance, and so it really is quite a dip in terms of peak power. This makes 120 peak, and so yeah, 35 horses down on that Super Quattro from the previous gen Panigale V2. Thing is though, that is a little bit up on the Stretta, which was more around 111 horsepower. And they also say they've built this engine to have a really nice spread of torque. There's 93 Newton meters peak, I believe, but also a lot of it is available across a wide spectrum of the rev range. So it should make for a good road engine and really appropriate for the other bikes that they're going to put it in. There is also a 115 horsepower variant that has a stronger generator to power the electrics on stuff like adventure bike like the Multistrada, but this is the more sporty 120 horsepower version. And I should also add there is a race exhaust that adds 6 horsepower and also sheds 4.5 kilograms of weight, but it's only homologated for the track. The other big change here is no Desmo valves, so hopefully the service intervals are fewer and further between, but also more affordable. And the big one, I guess, is that they've tried to make it really compact, so they've shed 9 kilograms versus the Super Quattro, and also about 6 kilograms versus the Stretta, and that, really, the lightness is one of this bike's big strengths. So let's take a look at the chassis, and one of the new key components here is the frame. It's a aluminium monocoque. It weighs just 4 kilograms, and perhaps the most interesting thing about it is the fact that it integrates the airbox. So the airbox is part of the frame, and that gives you a very slim and slender bike, which I think was one of the best things about the previous gen Panigale V2. It felt much smaller in stature and a little bit more manageable perhaps on the road than something like a Panigale V4. Now they give a figure for this that's wet weight with no fuel, and they say it comes in at 176 kilograms. There's slight variations for the Streetfighter version, and also we got 2 levels of spec, but they're all roughly around that point, and that is really quite impressive when you compare it to the bike it replaces. According to my research, if you look for the sort of same measurement of wet, no fuel, the Super Quattro-powered Panigale V2 came in at 190, so that's a massive 14 kilograms difference. And look, it doesn't quite make up for that drop in power. If you look at the power-to-weight ratios, the previous gen Panigale V2 is still superior, but perhaps, you know, when you take into consideration handling and cornering, that drop in weight might feel more valuable to a lot of riders. Now look, like I say, 2 levels of spec for this bike and the Streetfighter, so you can get a Panigale V2 or a V2S. Same for the Streetfighter, V2 or V2S. And one of the key differences is the suspension. The standard bikes get a 43mm Marzocchi fork. I believe it's a KYB shock at the rear. Whereas if you pay for the extra money for the S versions, you get Öhlins suspension all round. So it's an NIX30 fork, fully adjustable of course, and it gets a titanium nitride coating on the fork legs there to make it slide easier. It's low friction. And then of course the Öhlins fully adjustable shock as well, which you can see side mounted with its piggyback reservoir, which I think adds to the looks. You know, if it's got a little bit of gold anodization on it, the yellow spring, it always makes the bike look a bit more fancy and sporty. Now the shock goes through to a double-sided swing arm on both bikes, as per the Panigale V4, which was updated recently and moved from a single-sided swing arm to this double-sided. It's kind of similar in design. It's got a shape that's not too far away from the Panigale V4, and they say they made that design decision for the exact same reasons, so better grip, better stability, and better handling all round. On top of that, for both bikes you can fit an Öhlins steering damper, but that one's an accessory, so even on the S model you're going to have to pay a little bit extra. Now, another place that they found a little bit of weight savings is with the wheels. So they're cast aluminium. They've got a kind of new design to them. And they say, I think for the two, they're a kilogram lighter than the previous generation. And of course, saving weight on the wheels is going to have a more significant effect on the handling than if you save that weight elsewhere, because it's rotating mass and also unsprung mass. So it makes it easier to change direction and also allows the suspension to more easily do its job. As standard with the road tyres, it comes with Pirelli's Diablo Rosso 4, so a really good sporty all-rounder for the road. But as you can see on this particular bike, it's also humbucker-proof for slicks, and you can get them in two sizes on the rear. So it's got a nice big wide 190mm on the rear as standard, but you can also fit a 180 in the slicks, and those are the two sizes I believe that they use in World Supersport. Now, you might have expected a little bit of a difference in terms of like braking spec on the two models, the standard bike and the S, but they both get really well-spec'd Brembo M50 calipers, so they're a 4-piston radially mounted monoblock caliper on a pair of big 320mm discs, so proper good stuff. And there's also a Brembo radial master cylinder up at the lever, which should give a nice crisp feel. Now, they also say that the previous gen used M4.32 Brembo calipers, which look pretty similar, and we're talking about minute differences here, but they do say there's 140 grams saved per caliper on the bike, and so that's one of those little savings that contributes to that quite impressive weight drop in total. Now, with that drop in power, you might worry they've watered this bike down a little bit in terms of sportiness, but it does still sit pretty tall in the seat. I think it's 837mm, so there should still be plenty of ground clearance, and although it's not necessarily that cramped, the bars aren't super low and the pegs aren't super high either, you know, it still does feel very much like a sports bike. They also say they've shaped the tank like the Panigale V4s to really aid gripping it with your legs and when you're hanging off on the track and stuff like that. And then of course we should also point out that the Streetfighter is the naked version, so if you still find this a little too sporty, then that's probably the one to go for, with the flatter handlebars that give you that slightly more upright riding position. Now, in the cockpit, as for the sort of tech package, you'll notice there's a new TFT display here. This is their latest gen 5-inch full color TFT dash, and one of the interesting things about it is they've removed all the physical lights apart from the shift lights, so it's nice and clean looking, and all the sort of status lights and indicators and stuff like that, well, they're actually part of the TFT display, which is not something you see that frequently. They've also updated the switchgear, so you can see you've got a new directional pad to navigate all the settings here, cruise control buttons on the top and a mode switch, and then over here you've got your starter and your kill switch and stuff like that. So a very nice looking cockpit on this bike, really clean, very much like in this new dash as well. And they do say it's got a bunch of different layouts, so you can put it in like a road mode, but also there's more like a track orientated display. And you can see there's some navigation prompts on the left there, and that's part of the connectivity package, which means you can hook up your phone for media and nav and all those good things. Also, through the switchgear and dash, you can manage all of the rider modes and settings and stuff like that. And as you'd expect, you've got the absolute works. So you've got cornering ABS, cornering traction control, Ducati wheelie control. You've got their latest gen quick shifter, which uses the gear sensor, I believe, instead of like a strain gauge to give a really precise feel. Engine braking control, a whole bunch of riding modes. You can see also the settings are on the dash there, so you can see on the right what you've got each of the rider aids set to. So yeah, lovely stuff. Now, before we get on to the next bit, I just want to say a massive thanks to DJI for supporting the channel and making our EICMA coverage possible. The bob cam that I used to show you the cockpit there is the Osmo Action 5 Pro, their latest and greatest action cam. And of course, we use this back home to shoot all our reviews and stuff like that. We love using them because they're compact, they're small, they're light, they've got great image quality, brilliant battery life, and also a magnetic mounting system, which makes them really easy to move around. Genuinely love using these cameras on the bike, but also for vlogging and stuff like that when we're out at shows. And so I thoroughly recommend checking out the link in the description if you're looking to pick up an action cam to capture and share your motorcycle rides on social media and with your mates. So once again, a massive thanks to DJI for their support and making EICMA possible. Now, I've got to say, seeing this bike in the flesh, we have to give them some compliments for the styling package. It's really a very nice looking bike, and I think almost better looking possibly than the Panigale V4 that they announced just before it. There's no big surprises. It's red, it looks like a Ducati, it looks like a Panigale. But I will say, specifically on the back end of this V2, with the shock off to the side there, the dual-sided swing arm, which is an interesting design feature, the tail lights, which I really like, and also the underseat exhaust, which can be upgraded to some Terminiones as well that are road approved. You know, it's a fantastic looking bike from that sort of rear three-quarter. Naturally, the Streetfighter gets a little bit more of that naked style, but I think for me, out of the two, if we're purely going on visuals alone, it has to be the Panigale V2S, which, yeah, easily looks the best of the bunch. Now, thank you very much to Ducati for announcing pricing for this one, because a lot of the bikes that we're covering at EICMA, they're going to announce the price later. I guess that to delay having to say what it is, but here we go for this one. It's $14,995 for the base Panigale V2 and then $16,995 for the S model. Now that is pretty much the same, I believe, in terms of price versus the previous generation Panigale V2, which was 155 horsepower. I would say elsewhere though, they're spec quite similarly, and also of course this one is quite a lot lighter, and so it's an interesting one to call whether that is a fair price. I think it probably doesn't look too bad, and it's par for the course on the market at the moment, but I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. The Streetfighter version is about £1,000 less, so that is probably a big factor for some people, especially if they think they're going to find it a little bit more comfortable. So for the standard bike, you're looking at $13,990, and then for the S model, it's $15,990. So look, we'll wrap up with some quick scores on this bike. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 for performance. Obviously, it's going to be an absolute weapon, but I can't give it 5 because it has lost 35 horsepower versus the previous generation. Features, tech, spec, and all that sort of stuff, it's got to be 5 stars. This is dripping with tech. I don't think there's much more you could want on a sports bike like this, and also on the S model. Great suspension, great brakes on all the bikes. And so yeah, I don't think you can quite argue with 5 stars. Styling, I think you've got to go 5 on this one. It's a fantastic looking bike. Like I said, I think I actually prefer the dimensions of it to the Panigale V4, and so that's why I've got to give it 5, hands down. Especially this one behind us, which seems to have a bit of a race pack on it with the number 1. It's a bit foggy-esque, and I do like that one a lot. But look, I think we're going to have to go 1 star for affordability. This is a pricey bike. In some ways you get what you pay for, but there are other bikes coming on the market now, like the new Yamaha R9, which offers similar levels of performance, and clearly that's going to be a lot more affordable, whereas this is more at the premium end of the market. That gives it 15 in total, which is a decent score given what we saw yesterday. But as always, I'd love to know what you think of it, so do let us know down in the comments below. Also, we'll put our EICMA playlist on the screen now so you can keep up to date with all of our videos, so do check that out. And hit subscribe if you want to see all of the videos as soon as they go live. A massive thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you very shortly.